I still remember the way my sister looked at my husband the first time she met him. You know that kind of look people give when they think they're better than someone. That smug little half-smile, the quick glance from head to toe. Yeah, that was her. The moment she realized he didn't wear designer clothes or drive a shiny car, her expression changed, just a flicker, but I caught it. That was the day I understood that no matter how happy I was, my family would always find a reason to belittle it. My name's Emily, and this is the story of how my sister's arrogance turned into her biggest regret. I grew up in a family where appearances mattered more than honesty. My parents weren't rich, not really, but they liked to pretend. My mom cared more about how things looked than how they really were. She'd rather go into debt buying an expensive sofa than admit she couldn't afford it. My dad wasn't much better, always obsessed with status, always talking about what other people had and what we didn't. And my sister, oh God, my sister Claire, she was their golden child. The kind of daughter who could do no wrong. Straight A's, popular in school, perfect hair, perfect smile. You know the type, she didn't walk into a room, she arrived. And me, I was the quiet one. The one who didn't argue, who didn't fight for attention. I liked helping people, being outdoors, feeling grounded. Maybe that's why I fell in love with Jake. Jake wasn't flashy. He didn't wear fancy suits or have a college degree from some big university. He was a farmer, plain, simple, hardworking. The kind of man who'd wake up at dawn, spend his day building something real with his hands, and still come home with a smile. When I met him, he was selling produce at a local market. I remember he offered me a basket of strawberries, said, "These are the sweetest ones this season." I laughed and told him, "You sound awfully sure of yourself." He grinned and said, "Guess you'll just have to taste them to find out." That's how it started. Not with fireworks or fancy dinners, but with strawberries and laughter. Within a few months, I knew he was the one. He was honest, dependable, and made me feel safe in a way no one else ever had. But when I told my parents about him, the reaction was not what I hoped for. My mom's exact words were, "A farmer. Emily, are you serious?" My dad sighed and said, "You could have done better." Claire, of course, had to chime in with her usual poison. "So what does he do exactly?" "Shovel dirt all day." "That's cute." I remember sitting there at the dinner table, heart pounding, trying to keep my voice steady as I said, "He runs his own farm. He employs people, provides food for the community. He works harder than anyone I know." But my words fell flat. To them, success was measured in cars, clothes, and credit cards. Not sweat, soil, and self-respect. After that dinner, things changed. My parents stopped asking about my life. Claire would make little jabs whenever we talked. "How's life in the mud?" she'd say with a smirk. I tried to ignore it, but deep down it hurt. Still, Jake never let it get to him. He'd just smile and say, "People like that measure worth by the wrong things." And he was right. Our life together wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We built something real. Our mornings started with the sun, our evenings ended with the sound of crickets, and every night I went to sleep beside a man who loved me with his whole heart. A few years later, we got married in a small ceremony on the farm. Just close friends, a few neighbors, and my best friend as the maid of honor. My family didn't even show up. My mom claimed she wasn't feeling well, my dad said he had business to take care of, and Claire simply texted, "Wish I could make it." Busy weekend. I remember standing there that day, under the oak tree Jake had planted when he was a teenager, feeling both the happiest and saddest I'd ever been. Happy because I was marrying the love of my life. Sad because the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had chosen their pride over me. But life went on. And it was beautiful. We worked side by side, turning the small family farm into something bigger. Within 5 years, Jake expanded the operation, introduced organic crops, and signed contracts with local restaurants. We weren't rich, but we were stable, and we did it together. Then one day, everything changed. It started with a phone call from my mom. Her voice was unusually soft, almost trembling. "Emily," she said, "can we come visit?" That was strange, she hadn't visited the farm once in all these years. I said yes, of course, thinking maybe, just maybe, time had softened her heart. But I had no idea what was really coming. Because that visit would reveal every crack in my family's facade. It would expose their greed, their hypocrisy, and their desperation. And in the end, it would be Jake, the man they called, just a farmer, who would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. When my parents pulled into the driveway that morning, I felt like the world had tilted. It had been almost 5 years since they last visited me, and in all that time, not a single phone call had carried warmth. But there they were, stepping out of their shiny black SUV, dressed like they were attending a business lunch instead of visiting their daughter's home. My mom was in her pearls, my dad in a freshly pressed shirt, and Claire, well, Claire looked like she'd just stepped off a runway. Heels sinking slightly in the dirt, sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose. She looked around with a smirk and said, "Wow, so this is your life now." Jake was standing next to me, wiping his hands on a rag after checking one of the tractors. He smiled politely and said, "Good to see you folks. Hope the drive wasn't too rough." My dad gave a quick nod. "Long drive," he muttered. My mom forced a smile, clearly uncomfortable. Claire didn't even bother to greet Jake properly, she just waved a hand and said, "Hey, farmer." I wanted to shrink into the ground. But Jake, being the gentleman he is, didn't let her rudeness get to him. He said, "Lunch is ready if you all are hungry." My mom glanced around, clearly unimpressed by the rustic wooden table Jake had built himself. "Oh, you eat outside?" she asked. I smiled tightly. "When the weather's good, yes." She pursed her lips. How quaint. We all sat down to eat, though it was probably the most awkward meal of my life. My mom picked at her food, my dad mostly stared into space, and Claire scrolled through her phone, occasionally sighing dramatically. I tried to keep the conversation going. "So, how have you all been?" My mom glanced up and said, "Fine. Just busy, you know." Then, without missing a beat, she added, "You must be tired of this lifestyle by now, right? Living out here, working all the time." Jake looked at her, calm as ever. "It's honest work, ma'am. And it's given us everything we need." Claire snorted. "Everything you need. You used to talk about traveling, seeing the world, starting your own design business. Now you're," she gestured toward the barn, "milking cows." My hands clenched under the table. Before I could speak, Jake said softly, "She's done more here than most people do chasing titles. This place runs because of her." That silenced Claire, at least for a moment. But I could feel the tension simmering. The way they kept glancing around, whispering between bites, it wasn't just discomfort. Something else was going on. After lunch, Jake went to check on the greenhouse, and I led my family into the living room. That's when my dad finally said it. "Emily," he began, clearing his throat, "we wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." My stomach dropped. I knew it. This wasn't a family visit, it was a favor. My mom's eyes darted toward my dad as he continued, "We've hit a little financial trouble." I frowned. "What kind of trouble?" Claire sighed loudly. "It's not a big deal, just some business stuff gone wrong. Dad invested in something that didn't work out, and now we're a little short." My mom added quickly, "It's temporary. We just need a small loan." There it was, the real reason they were here. I took a slow breath. "How much are we talking about?" My dad hesitated, then said, 20,000. I almost laughed. $20,000. My mom nodded, as if asking for a cup of sugar. "You two have done well for yourselves, haven't you? You can help us out until we get back on our feet." Claire chimed in, "Yeah, I mean, you've got all this land. You can just sell something." I stared at them, speechless. The same people who had mocked Jake for being a farmer were now asking for money from him. The irony was painful. Jake walked back in just then, wiping his hands again. "Everything okay?" he asked. My mom turned to him with her practiced smile. "Jake, dear, we were just talking about something important. We were hoping you could help us out." He raised an eyebrow. "Help you out how?" My dad cleared his throat again. "We need a short-term loan. About 20,000. Jake stood there for a moment, not saying a word. Then he nodded slowly. "I see." He looked at me, then back at them. "Can I ask why?" Claire rolled her eyes. "Does it matter? You've got the money, don't you?" Jake's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. "It does matter. I like to know what I'm investing in." My mom bristled. We're not asking for an investment, Jake. It's family. Jake smiled, but there was something in his eyes, something sharp. Family, huh? Funny, I don't remember family showing up when Emily and I were scraping by our first year. I don't remember family at our wedding. My dad shifted uncomfortably. That's in the past. Jake nodded slowly. You're right. But tell you what, I'll think about it. Give me a few days. Claire scoffed. A few days. Wow, you really take this farmer stuff seriously. Jake didn't respond. He just turned and walked out to the fields. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying everything. My family's entitled tone, the way they looked at Jake like he owed them something. It made me sick. I wanted to tell him not to give them a dime. But I knew Jake, he'd think it through, not out of spite, but out of principle. The next morning, I found him already outside, feeding the chickens, his eyes focused but distant. You're thinking about them, aren't you? I said softly. He smiled faintly. A little. I'm thinking about how people only remember you when they need something. I sighed. You're not really going to give them the money, are you? He looked at me, and for a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said, no. But I am going to give them something else. I frowned. What do you mean? Jake wiped his hands and said quietly, a lesson they'll never forget. And he meant it. That was the beginning of everything, the turning point. Because what Jake did next would not only change how my family saw him, it would completely destroy the illusion they'd built around themselves. They had no idea that the man they called, just a farmer, was about to show them what real power looked like. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. My family stayed at the guest house near the barn, pretending everything was fine, but I could feel the tension in every meal, every glance. They were waiting for Jake's answer, and honestly, so was I. I knew him well enough to sense when his mind was working behind that calm expression. He was polite as always, offering them breakfast, making small talk, but there was a certain stillness in his tone, the kind that told me something was brewing. By the third morning, my dad finally broke the silence. He walked into the kitchen while I was making coffee and said, "So, has Jake said anything about the money?" His voice carried that same edge of entitlement that used to make me flinch when I was younger. I stirred my cup slowly and said, "He's thinking about it." My mom appeared right behind him, her perfume flooding the room. "What's there to think about? We raised you, Emily. The least you can do is help us when we need it." Those words stung, not because they were true, but because they weren't. My parents didn't raise me, they raised their expectations of me. They wanted perfection, obedience, and someone they could brag about, not someone who followed her own path. I forced a smile. "We'll talk about it at dinner," I said, trying to diffuse the moment. When Jake came in from the fields, dust on his jeans and a small grin on his face, he whispered to me, "Dinner's going to be interesting tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "You're planning something, aren't you?" He winked. "You'll see." That night, we set the table outside under the string lights Jake had hung last summer. The golden glow made everything look warm and peaceful, even though my stomach was twisted into knots. My parents and Claire joined us reluctantly, dressed as if they were attending a formal dinner instead of sitting under the open sky. Jake served roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and wine made from local grapes. Claire sniffed the glass and muttered, "Wow, fancy for farmer life." Jake smiled. "I try my best." My dad cleared his throat. "So, Jake, any thoughts on our situation?" Jake set his fork down gently. "Actually, yes. I've been thinking about it a lot." He leaned back, his voice calm and steady. "I'd like to help. But before I do, I need to be sure it's worth the investment." Claire frowned. "What does that even mean?" "We're your family." Jake nodded. "Exactly. Which is why I think it's fair to know what this money is going toward." My mom exchanged a quick glance with my dad. "It's just a small business deal that went bad," she said carefully. "We put money into a development project that was supposed to double our return, but the partner ran off. Now we need to pay back some loans before the bank steps in." Jake tilted his head. "So it's not temporary, then?" My dad's tone hardened. "It's just a setback. We'll recover." Jake smiled faintly. "I believe you. But here's my concern. Last time we saw each other, I was told I wasn't good enough for Emily. That I'd never amount to anything because I'm just a farmer. I remember those words clearly. So, before I lend $20,000, I need to understand why you think a man like me can suddenly afford to save you. The air froze. Claire blinked, her lips parting as if to respond, but no words came out. My mom looked offended. Jake, that's not fair to bring up. He cut her off gently. I think it's more than fair. His tone wasn't angry, it was calm, grounded, but it carried weight. You all dismissed what I do because it didn't fit your idea of success. You thought farming meant failure. But let me tell you something, this land feeds hundreds of families every month. It employs 20 people, and yes, it brings in more than enough to live comfortably. But I don't measure success in dollars. I measure it in peace, in hard work, in honesty. There was silence, the kind that burns. My dad finally muttered, we were just trying to protect Emily. Farming's not easy. Jake nodded slowly. Neither is humility. Claire rolled her eyes. Okay, lecture over. So are you giving us the money or not? Jake smiled. Actually, I am. But under one condition. My family leaned forward, hopeful. What condition? My mom asked. Jake took a slow sip of wine, then said, you'll work for it. They stared at him, stunned. Excuse me, Claire scoffed. Jake nodded toward the fields. Tomorrow morning, we start early. You'll help with harvest, it's the busiest time of year. You'll work with my crew for 1 week. If you can handle it, if you can show me you respect what we do, then I'll write you a check for $20,000. My mom gasped, Jake, that's ridiculous. Jake's voice didn't waver. So is asking for money from people you look down on. My dad stood up. We're not laborers. Jake's eyes met his. No, but maybe it's time you understand what labor really means. Claire laughed bitterly. You expect me to go pick vegetables in a field? Are you insane? Jake shrugged. Your choice. But the offer stands for 1 week. My parents exchanged shocked looks, but no one said a word. Dinner ended in silence. When everyone went to bed, I turned to Jake and whispered, you really think they'll do it? He smiled. Pride's a funny thing. When people are desperate enough, they'll do anything to protect it, even swallow it. I didn't believe him at first. I thought they'd leave in the morning. But when the sun rose over the fields, I heard the sound of footsteps, hesitant, awkward, but unmistakably real. There they were. My parents in old boots, Claire in borrowed jeans and a floppy hat, all standing in front of the barn, squinting against the morning light. Jake grinned. Welcome to the farm. And that was the moment I realized, he wasn't just teaching them a lesson about money. He was teaching them what worth really meant. Because sometimes, the only way to humble people who worship status, is to make them earn their dignity back with their own hands. The morning air was thick with the smell of wet soil and freshly cut hay. Jake stood near the barn with his hands on his hips, watching as my family stumbled toward him. Claire looked horrified by the mud splattered on her sneakers, while my mom was clutching a bottle of hand sanitizer like it was a weapon. My dad, though trying to keep his dignity intact, looked lost. Jake didn't mock them, not even once. He just smiled and said, glad you all made it out. The crew's already started, so let's not waste time. He handed each of them a pair of gloves and pointed toward the far side of the field where rows of ripe produce waited to be harvested. We're picking tomatoes today. Simple enough, twist gently, don't crush the fruit, and fill the baskets. My mom frowned. Jake, is this really necessary? He looked at her evenly. If you want the money, yes. If not, you can go home. There was a long pause before Claire sighed dramatically and muttered, fine. Whatever. I stayed close to Jake as they made their way through the rows, awkwardly crouching and fumbling with the plants. The sun was already warm, and within minutes, Claire was complaining about the heat. This is insane, she grumbled. People actually do this for a living. Jake nodded. Every day, rain or shine. My dad, sweating and red-faced, tried to keep up, but it was clear he wasn't used to physical work. My mom sat down after only 20 minutes, her hair sticking to her forehead. Jake, this is too much, she said breathlessly. We're not built for this kind of thing. Jake crouched next to her, his tone calm but firm. Neither are most of the people who do it. But they don't have a choice. That's what you never understood. You think hard work is beneath you because you've never had to rely on it. She looked away, embarrassed, but didn't respond. By lunchtime, everyone was exhausted. Jake had prepared sandwiches and lemonade under the shade of an old oak tree. My family sat silently, wiping sweat from their faces. Claire took a sip of water and muttered, "I don't get it. Why would anyone choose this life?" Jake looked at her. "Because this life feeds yours. Every meal you've ever had came from hands like these. Hands you've mocked." No one said a word after that. As the days went on, something started to shift. The first few mornings, my family showed up late, dragging their feet. But by the third day, they arrived on time. By the fourth, Claire actually stopped complaining. I caught her watching Jake as he worked, his movements steady and precise. There was something grounding about him, the quiet strength, the patience, the way he treated every task like it mattered. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, Claire approached me while Jake was putting tools away. "You know," she said softly, "I think I get it now." I raised an eyebrow. "Get what?" She glanced toward Jake. "Why you stayed. He's different. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's real." I never had that. Her voice cracked slightly, and for the first time in years, I saw the sister I used to know, not the arrogant, sharp-tongued woman who looked down on everyone, but the girl who once held my hand when I was scared of thunderstorms. "I judged you," she admitted. "All of us did. I thought you settled for less, but maybe you found more." I smiled gently. "It's not about settling, Claire. It's about choosing peace over pride." She nodded, silent for a moment. "Don't tell Dad I said that," she whispered, and we both laughed quietly. The next morning, my dad joined Jake by the tractor before sunrise. I watched from the porch as they talked for a while. Later, Jake told me my dad had asked how he managed the business side of the farm. He was curious, Jake said, a faint smile playing on his lips. I showed him the books, the systems, how we run things. My dad wasn't mocking anymore. He was learning. Even my mom started to soften. She began helping in the kitchen, chatting with the crew, even complimenting the food. The woman who once criticized everything was now laughing at small jokes and asking questions about the animals. By the end of the week, the change was visible, not complete, but undeniable. Their clothes were dirty, their hands calloused, and their pride, humbled. On the seventh evening, Jake gathered everyone outside. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the fields glowed like gold. My family stood quietly, waiting. Jake walked up to my dad and said, "You've worked hard this week." I meant what I said. I don't lend money easily. But I also don't hold grudges. You've shown effort. You've earned my respect. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Here's your check." My dad took it slowly, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at Jake, then at me. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, in a low voice, he said, "I was wrong about you." Jake smiled softly. "You weren't wrong, Mr. Peters. You just didn't look close enough." There was a heavy pause before my mom stepped forward. Her eyes were shiny, and her voice was almost a whisper. "Thank you, Jake. Truly." Jake nodded. "You're welcome. But I hope you remember, not every man in boots and dirt is beneath you. Sometimes, he's the one holding the ground you stand on." That night, after they went to bed, I wrapped my arms around Jake and whispered, "You really did it. You made them see." He smiled and kissed my forehead. They needed to see for themselves. That's the only way people change. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in years, I felt light, like a weight I'd been carrying since childhood had finally lifted. But little did I know, the story wasn't over yet. Because sometimes, when people are humbled, they change. And sometimes, they don't. The real test was still to come. The morning after Jake handed my dad that check, everything seemed peaceful. The air was cool, the field shimmered in the sunrise, and for the first time, I saw my parents smile genuinely. They looked lighter, softer, as if a part of their old selves had melted away with the sweat of hard work. My mom made pancakes for everyone, Claire helped set the table, and my dad even laughed when one of the farmhands made a joke about his city hands. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, things had changed for good. But deep down, I knew my family too well. Their pride wasn't gone, it was just sleeping. Jake must have sensed it too. He was quiet that morning, more thoughtful than usual. After breakfast, he took a walk out to the fence line. I followed him, brushing the dew from my jeans. You think they've really learned something? I asked. He watched the horizon for a long time before answering. They've learned enough to act humble. But whether that humility stays when they're back in their comfort zone, that's something we'll find out soon. He was right. That afternoon, when my dad called the bank to make a payment with the check Jake had given him, I overheard him talking to someone on the phone. His voice was calm at first, but then I caught something, a tone I hadn't heard in a week. That old arrogance. Yeah, my son-in-law helped us out, he said. You know, he's actually done all right for himself, considering what he does. Farming. Hardly what I'd call a real business, but it works. I froze in the doorway, my heart sinking. There it was again, the same condescension, just dressed in gratitude. I stepped back quietly, not wanting to confront him then. But Jake, he already knew. That evening, we all sat down for dinner again. The atmosphere was different. My family was packing to leave the next morning, and there was that strange mix of relief and tension in the air, like everyone wanted to say something but didn't know how. Jake broke the silence. So, how was your week? My dad chuckled. Exhausting. But enlightening. My mom smiled faintly. I'll admit, I never thought I'd see myself out in a field. It gives you perspective. Jake nodded. Perspective is good. Keeps people grounded. There was something in his tone that made me glance at him. He wasn't done. I could feel it. After dinner, as my family started to gather their things, Jake cleared his throat. Before you all head out, I wanted to show you something. He walked toward his office, the small, well-kept building next to the barn where he handled all the farm's business. My parents followed, curious, and Claire trailed behind, phone in hand. Inside, Jake pulled a folder from his desk and laid it open. These, he said, are the farm's financial records for the past 3 years. I wanted you to see something. My dad frowned. Jake, that's not necessary. Jake interrupted him calmly. It is. Because I think it's time you understand the kind of man you've been underestimating. He spread the papers across the desk. The numbers were clean, strong, 6 figures in net income every year. Profits reinvested, savings accounts, a few charitable donations to local schools and community centers. My mom blinked at the totals. Claire's jaw dropped. Jake continued, his voice low and steady. This farm isn't just land and crops. It's a business. A sustainable, debt-free operation that supports dozens of families. When you asked me for $20,000, I could have written that check without blinking. But I needed you to understand where that money came from. It didn't fall from the sky. It came from discipline, sacrifice, and hard work, the same work you once mocked. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. My dad's face turned red, not from embarrassment, but from something else. Ego. He cleared his throat. Well, I suppose you've done well for yourself. You've proven your point. Jake didn't move. I didn't do this to prove a point. I did it because Emily deserves respect, the kind you never gave her. My mom spoke softly. Jake, we're sorry, truly. He looked at her, his eyes kind but firm. Apologies are easy. Change is harder. If you mean it, show it. Claire swallowed hard. How? Jake smiled faintly. By never calling someone small for the way they live. By remembering that wealth isn't measured by status but by integrity. No one spoke for a long time after that. Then, slowly, my dad extended his hand. Jake took it. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. That night, after my family went to bed, I found Jake sitting outside, looking up at the stars. You didn't have to show them all that, I said softly. He smiled without looking at me. I did. Because pride doesn't die in silence. It dies when you face the truth. I sat beside him, resting my head on his shoulder. Do you think they'll change? He sighed. Maybe. Or maybe not. But at least now they know the kind of people they judged, and the kind of strength they'll never understand. The next morning, my family packed up and left. My mom hugged me tightly, whispering, "You have a good man, Emily. Don't let us ruin that." My dad shook Jake's hand again, quieter this time. And Claire, before getting into the car, turned to me with a small smile. You were right, she said. Peace over pride. As the SUV disappeared down the road, I stood beside Jake, watching the dust trail fade into the distance. He slipped his arm around me and said, "You know, I don't hold grudges. But I never forget lessons." I smiled. "Neither do I." And as the wind carried the scent of earth and rain across the fields, I realized something important: revenge doesn't always come in anger. Sometimes, it comes in grace, in dignity, in showing people the life they tried to shame you for, and thriving anyway. Jake didn't just teach my family a lesson that week. He taught me one too: that real strength isn't loud or proud. It's steady. It's quiet. It's knowing who you are when everyone else doubts you. And that's something no amount of money could ever buy. Months passed after that long week on the farm. Life slowly returned to normal, or maybe I should say, it settled into something better than normal. Jake and I were closer than ever. The land thrived that season, the fields were greener, the crops fuller, and our lives calmer. We spent evenings sitting on the porch, watching sunset spill gold across the horizon. For a while, I didn't hear much from my parents. They called occasionally, asked how we were doing, tried to sound supportive. I wanted to believe that week had truly changed them, that the lesson Jake gave had sunk in deep. But change, I learned, doesn't last if pride still whispers in the background. One afternoon, I was at the farmer's market selling fresh produce when I overheard a conversation that made my heart sink. Two women, old family friends of my mother, were talking near the tomato stall. "Did you hear?" one said. "Emily's husband, the farmer, apparently runs some kind of side business now. Guess they're finally making real money." The other chuckled. "Oh, I heard that's all thanks to her parents. They loaned them money years ago, didn't they? Typical, they lift him up, and he takes all the credit." My hands froze around the basket. That was a lie. My parents hadn't given us a single dollar. In fact, Jake had bailed them out. When I got home that evening, I told Jake everything. He listened quietly, then smiled, a calm, knowing smile. "Let them talk," he said. "People only rewrite stories when the truth makes them uncomfortable." I frowned. "But it's not right. They're taking credit for your success." Jake leaned back in his chair, his eyes steady. "Then we'll show them what success really looks like." That night, he started working on something, quietly, diligently. He made calls, met with people, and began drafting plans. I didn't ask questions, I trusted him. 2 months later, Jake's project was complete. He had purchased a failing grocery store chain in the city, the same one where my dad used to shop proudly every weekend. He rebranded it completely: Farmer's Pride. Locally sourced products, direct from our farm and others like ours. Fresh, affordable, honest food, nothing flashy, just real. Within weeks, it became a hit. News outlets featured Jake's initiative as a revolution for sustainable living. He was invited to interviews, seminars, and conferences. The same people who once dismissed him as just a farmer now called him a visionary. And guess who saw it first on TV? My parents. One Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice trembled. "Emily, is that Jake's store on Channel 7? Farmer's Pride?" "Yes," I said simply. My dad got on the line. "That's incredible. He's done really well." "He has," I said. "And you know what's funny? The first flagship store he opened, it's right across from the old shopping complex where you used to brag about your business deals." There was silence on the other end. Then, quietly, my dad said, "You're proud of him, aren't you?" "I always was," I replied. "I just wish you had been too." After that, they began visiting again, not out of arrogance this time, but humility. My dad walked through the aisles of Farmer's Pride, greeting employees who respected Jake deeply. He saw pictures of local farmers proudly displayed on the walls, people just like Jake. Honest, hardworking. And when he came across a small framed photo near the cashier, one of Jake and me standing in front of our barn, smiling with dirt still on our hands, he stopped. Underneath it, the plaque read, "Respect isn't given by wealth. It's earned through work that feeds others." My dad stood there for a long time. I could see something in his eyes shift, a mix of pride, regret, and realization. After that day, my parents never spoke down to Jake again. They started supporting local farms, attending community events, even volunteering at small food drives that Jake sponsored. It was as if they finally understood that dignity doesn't come from a job title, it comes from the kind of person you are when no one's watching. But the story didn't end there. A year later, during Thanksgiving, Jake surprised everyone again. We had invited my family over, and after dinner, he stood up and raised a toast. "I want to thank you," he said, looking straight at my parents. "For everything, the lessons, the challenges, even the doubts. Because without them, I wouldn't have had the fire to build what I did." Sometimes, the best motivation comes from being underestimated. My mom's eyes welled up. My dad nodded slowly, his voice soft. "You proved us wrong, Jake. And I'm glad you did." Jake smiled. "You didn't just underestimate me. You underestimated Emily, too. She's the reason I never gave up." Everyone raised their glasses. It was a quiet, emotional moment, not one of revenge or victory, but redemption. As the night grew darker and the fire crackled in the background, I thought about how far we'd come. From being mocked for loving a farmer to watching him become a symbol of respect and perseverance, life had truly come full circle. Jake didn't destroy my family. He transformed them. He turned humiliation into humility, pride into perspective, and insult into inspiration. And that, I realized, was the purest form of revenge, not in anger, but in grace. Not by tearing others down, but by rising so high they have no choice but to look up. As I looked across the table at Jake, smiling in the glow of his quiet success, I knew that everything we went through, every insult, every challenge, every doubt, had been worth it. Because in the end, respect wasn't something Jake demanded. He earned it, and he taught everyone else how to do the same. A year later, everything felt different, calmer, fuller, and strangely peaceful. I still woke up early every morning to the sound of roosters and the golden stretch of dawn spilling across the fields. But now, those mornings carried something they hadn't before: pride. Not the kind that screams for attention, but the kind that whispers, "You made it." Jake's business, Farmer's Pride, had grown far beyond what anyone expected. It wasn't just a chain anymore, it had become a movement. Local farmers across the state joined the network, finding security and dignity in their work again. Schools invited Jake to speak to students about entrepreneurship. Documentaries covered his journey from being mocked as just a farmer to becoming a symbol of integrity and sustainable success. And me, I found my own rhythm again. I started managing Farmers' Pride's community outreach programs, helping other women start small agricultural ventures. Every time I stood on a stage or in front of a group of people, I remembered how it all began, with one cruel comment from my sister and the quiet strength of the man beside me. One day, as I was preparing a presentation in my office, my phone rang. It was Sarah, my sister. Her voice was soft. "Hey, can we talk?" It had been almost a year since we last spoke properly. After the farm incident and everything that followed, our relationship had faded into awkward silence. "Of course," I said. She took a shaky breath. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For what I said about Jake. For how I treated you both. I guess I was jealous. You had everything I didn't: peace, love, purpose. I was too blind to see it." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then, gently, I replied, "Sarah, it's okay. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." She sniffed quietly. "You really forgive me?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. I already did. That night, I told Jake about the call. He smiled, that same calm, humble smile I'd fallen in love with. "Told you," he said. "People eventually find their way back when they see what truth looks like." He was right. A few weeks later, Sarah visited the farm for the first time in over 2 years. I watched as she stood at the edge of the field, taking in the sight of the wind moving through the crops like waves. Jake greeted her kindly, no resentment, no tension, just warmth. She looked at him and said, "You built all this, with your own hands?" Jake nodded. "With a lot of help from your sister." Sarah's eyes softened. "You two make a good team." For the first time in a long while, I felt something heal. My parents came too. This time, they didn't come with judgment or expectations, they came to help. Dad fixed fences, Mom baked bread for the workers, and we all ate dinner together at a long wooden table under the string lights Jake had hung across the yard. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And somewhere between laughter and the scent of freshly baked pie, I realized that life had come full circle. The people who once looked down on us were now the ones helping us build something bigger, something that went beyond revenge or pride. It was about growth, about love, about proving that strength doesn't have to shout, sometimes it just stands tall and lets the truth speak for itself. Later that evening, Jake and I stood outside, watching the stars. The crickets hummed softly, and the air smelled of hay and peace. "Do you ever think," I asked quietly, "that maybe all of this, the pain, the rejection, had to happen?" Jake looked up at the sky. "Maybe. Sometimes life breaks you just enough to see what you're really made of." I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. "You were never just a farmer." He chuckled. "And you were never just someone's daughter or sister. You were the reason I never gave up." The world around us was silent except for the gentle whisper of the wind through the fields. And in that moment, I felt something rare, peace not built on revenge or victory, but on understanding. Because the truth was, the greatest revenge wasn't in proving others wrong. It was in living well enough that their opinions no longer mattered. The girl whose family once mocked her for loving a farmer had built a life others could only dream of, not because she fought them, but because she rose